Welcome to Wines and Wonders with Kirsten Fox. True stories with a side of wine. Looking for inspiration for your life and your wine glass? This is your podcast. Here's Kirsten.
So excited you're joining me today. Have you ever wondered if angels are among us? If there are heavenly beings that are here on earth to help us? Now, I'm not talking about the humans we call angels, like hospice workers and firefighters and nurses, or in my case, math teachers. They must all be angels. But I'm talking about the real heavenly angels that come from heaven to help us here on earth. So this season, you're hearing stories about my own life that I call beyond coincidence. These are situations that have happened to me to show me that there is a higher power that is at play in my life. And if you stay tuned to the whole show, you'll discover a wine I choose to pair with each of these stories. So today's show is called Angels on Earth. About 10 years ago, my two sisters, Sarah and Allison, and I started to see some pretty bizarre behavior from my mom. None of us lived near her. She was in San Diego. But when we would visit, she would do weird things like forgetting where she left her car. She'd park her car. She was having trouble operating a cell phone she'd had for years. And she would repeat stories. You'd be sitting at dinner with her and she'd repeat stories at the same meal that she'd already told you at the meal. So after discussing this with my sisters, we decided we better get her in to see a neurologist. And I was my mom's medical POA, so I was responsible for her medical care. So I flew in and I took her to a neurologist. After some testing, she was diagnosed with early onset dementia. Now, she was only 65 years old. My mom was the most pragmatic, realistic, sensible person I have ever met in my entire life. She was almost unhuman. Since she was like this, she was very organized and wanted to prepare everything for everyone so that no one was inconvenienced or didn't understand what was going on and the reality of a situation. So with her dementia, she wanted us to be prepared for the inevitable mental decline that she was going to go through. And she wanted us to know her wishes like nobody's business. She clearly outlined to each of us, together and individually, every time she saw us, about what she wanted to happen as the dementia was going to progress. She even signed documents to reflect that she wanted to leave the planet before she was stuck in a memory care unit. She did not want to be sitting in some wheelchair somewhere, wasting her money on not knowing where she was, not knowing what food she was eating, not knowing who we were. So she made that very clear to us. We all knew. She basically even said at this, which I totally agree with, we treat our animals with more respect than we do the dying, mentally dying people on our planet. And so my sisters and I, as we heard this and dealt with it in our own ways, we started spending as much time as possible with her, as we knew we were going to be slowly losing her over time. So about 5 years passed after her initial diagnosis. One day in the middle of June of 2018, I got a call from one of her friends at the place she was living. Now, she was still in an independent care facility. Now, this was a place that had independent care, but then it also had memory care unit and nursing care and all that. But she was in her own apartment, and we had turned the stove off. At this point, she couldn't turn the stove on, but she was living independently. And last I had seen her, she seemed to be just doing fine. But this friend who called me related that she was walking around outside her apartment in her pajamas, say, with her tennis shoes on, to go for a walk with one of them. And she was walking down the halls and knocking on people's doors, seeing where I was and where my sisters were because they were visiting, but she couldn't find us. And then the friend related that she was telling everybody at dinner when they would sit down that there were strangers coming into her room at night and bothering her when she was trying to sleep. So obviously something was seriously going wrong. And I called the doctor and we had someone go check on her. Well, it turns out she had contracted a urinary tract infection, a UTI, but perfectly, as she was heading into the worst part of dementia now, she didn't want to treat it. As her healthcare provider and spokesperson, I knew that she didn't want to treat it and that this infection would eventually take over her body and she would pass away. So plans were made and she came to live with me. So we had a great time together. My mom, although she was deep into dementia, she was still super happy and fun to be around. And I mean, she would giggle about things and she was just great to be around. My kids came for a visit and we all knew it would be the last time they'd see her. She was so strong saying goodbye to my kids. I mean, literally in the happiest voice, she said, "I've loved being your grandmother. Excuse me. I've loved being your grandmother. I'll see you in heaven," with a big, huge smile on her face. You know, of course, I was a mess, as I am right now. So about 2 weeks after my kids visited, one morning my mom didn't come out of her bedroom. And I went in, obviously worried, and something had happened and she couldn't move. She couldn't speak. Well, she could move her arms, but she couldn't get up. She couldn't get herself out of bed. And I called my sisters, and basically both of them live in Denver. And I said, you know, you guys need to get out here now. So that was about an 8-hour drive. And then I called the hospice team to come in and help me with getting my mom comfortable in this bed. So my sisters arrived the following day, and we were gathered in my driveway of my house, greeting each other and crying and just saying, you know, giving hugs and all this. And one of my neighbors, who I just adore, named Pam, was walking by and came up and said, you know, "What's going on? What's wrong?" And I explained, you know, my mom's taken a downward turn and my sisters are here to say goodbye. And Pam said, "You know, I play the harp. Would you all like me to come over and play the harp for your mom? It can be extremely peaceful." And my sisters and I were, you know, all looked at each other and said, "Yes, my gosh, that would be amazing." So Pam brought over her traveling harp. I mean, who has a traveling harp? But Pam did. And we got all set up in this small bedroom where my mom was lying in the bed. Pam sat on a chair, and then my sister Sarah was in a chair next to my mom's bed. And then the rest of us, because it was such a small room, we were all kind of just sitting around on the floor. My other sister Allison was there, and my youngest, who lives with me, was with me as well. My oldest had left after they said goodbye. So Pam started to play. Now, as we sat in this room, listening to this heavenly, ethereal music, it began to look to all of us like my mom was attending a cocktail party with people who were hovering above her. Now, she couldn't speak, and we could not understand a word she was saying, but her intonation and her hands, she would reach up above her as she was laying there and look like she was shaking people's hands and laughing, and she'd open her hands wide and go, like someone had just told a great joke, and she would look around in the top half of the room, and it appeared like she was recognizing old friends. She was alive and working with these people or whatever was above her. And, we were all exchanging glances as we observed this whole strange social behavior that we were seeing from her as we were hearing this beautiful harp music. And then, out of the blue, my mom looked at my sister Sarah sitting on the chair next to the bed, and she said, as clear as day, "See that lady in the corner?" Pointing to me in the corner. And Sarah said, "You mean Kirsten?" And my mom said, "No, the lady above her. She needs a glass of wine." And then my mom went back to gibberish and having this cocktail party above her space. And my sisters and I and Pam were looking at each other. I do not know how Pam didn't stop playing. It makes so much sense because my mom was always the perfect hostess, and she wanted everyone to have food and drink at a party she was throwing. And truly, we felt the presence of these spirits that were welcoming my mom into her new life. And thankfully, it sounds like angels need wine too, or at least my mom thinks they do. And I'm sure the wines in heaven are pretty amazing. I will pair, in my opinion, the perfect wine to this story after our break.
Stay tuned to hear what type of wine Kirsten will pair with this story right after this.
Today's podcast is brought to you by my online wine education company called The Savvy Wine Shopper. So, of course, I love wine, as you know. And I love studying and talking about it to whoever will listen. But I know many people don't really want to go that far into the study of the subject. They just want to know how to shop for wines that will go with their dinners or their picnics or at cocktail parties. What wine will go best with my chicken biryani? I'm doing an Italian appetizer spread. What should I serve for the guests that will work with all these different foods? What kind of wine gifts offer the best prices for the most values? The Savvy Wine Shopper offers short, informative, cut-to-the-chase courses, and we're adding more every day to help you be a more confident shopper so that you can buy something other than those 4 standard go-to wines that we know you always buy. Join on our website at savvyWineshopper.com. Join our free tips and tricks email right on the homepage, and we'll send you a weekly tip about shopping for great wines. savvyWineshopper.com.
Welcome back to Wines and Wonders, stories with a side of wine. Here's Kirsten Fox.
Thank you so much for being here today. If you missed the first half, my dying mom was at my house and we were gathered around her as she laid in bed as one of my friends played the harp for her. It clearly appeared to us that my mom, who couldn't speak or get out of bed, was greeting people above her, shaking hands, laughing, basically having a party in the air above her bed. At one point, she speaks perfectly to my sister, who's next to her, to get the lady hovering above me, as I was sitting on the floor, a glass of wine. Truly, sounds like a fun cocktail party my mom was at before she died. So since my mom wanted to get her a glass of wine, who better than a Psalm to do that? And I am her Psalm daughter. So I think about a perfect wine had I had it in the house to serve to that angel. And let's first talk about what I think the perfect type of wine would be to serve to an angel. In my mind, the wine would have to be white, because It would not do, obviously, to have red wine stains on any of the angels' clothing and all their flowing robes. So it has to be a white wine. Secondly, the wine would have to be light-bodied without a lot of alcohol in it. Otherwise the angels would get like weighed down and it may be hard for them to like fly around, and they may bump into St. Peter's Gate, and they'd be a menace. So we need to have a light-bodied, low alcohol wine. Third, since they have halos, it would be fun to have a wine with bubbles in it so they could play that great halo pong game that I'm sure angels play up in heaven. So, with these parameters, my pairing for angels on earth is a Prosecco from Italy. You may have already been thinking of that. So Prosecco is a light-bodied sparkling wine made in the Prosecco region of northeastern Italy from a grape called the Glera grape. Cool history about Prosecco. It was first made at these northeastern Italian wineries for the workers and the owners of the vineyards to drink in the middle of the day. So they wanted something that was light in alcohol, refreshing, and something that wouldn't put them to sleep because they had to be back out in the fields being productive in the afternoon. So this was the wine they made for themselves. And in fact, it wasn't really even exported internationally until the 1980s, 1990s. So it's only just come into the United States over the last 30 years or so. And it's just so fun and popular. Which Prosecco do I recommend? Get your pencils ready.
Next up, Kirsten's choice for a wine to open after the show.
Thanks again to the Savvy Wine Shopper for sponsoring the show for you today. My choice for a perfect Prosecco to pair with the angels at a cocktail party, specifically the one above my head at my mom's heavenly cocktail party, I would recommend something called Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG, and specifically Mio Netto, if you can get that brand. So here is what I'm saying. Try to write this down. Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG. And Italian, basically, they say every letter, and so just spell it the way I've said it. Now, this is a smaller, higher quality area within the Prosecco region, and it has the perfect cool region and the right soil to grow Glera grapes that turn into the most lovely Prosecco. Now, if you can't find the Mio Netto brand, look for a Valdobbiadene Prosecco Superiore DOCG. And spelling and links are in our show notes, so you can look for it there. That's it for today's show. I really appreciate you listening to me relate the amazing story of the cocktail party in my mom's room, the story of angels on earth that we saw, and the proof to me that even angels like a little wine.
Thank you for tuning in to Wines and Wonders with Kirsten Fox. True stories with a side of wine.